mention that law to give us that information. But back to him, if you wanna,
Dwayne, I guess, look at
So, I
some
mean,
things we
it's
could
just,
do.
I just wanna reinforce, this is it's a needs analysis, this is a concept.
right,
There is no picking one or the other. It was just, I'll call it eyewash. The danger of putting some of that hard line stuff in there is that people think it's already ready to go to construction. It's not. There's lots of conversations, lots of study. This was really to start the
Give us
this is
some
what we heard,
ideas,
guys, and
right.
then everybody can react and say,
Right.
you missed this, we're not there. Guess what? Our budget actually is 3 and not 5. So guess what does that mean? There's stuff that has to, you gotta rework it. So we're not there. It's really just meant to start the conversation.
so part of that first conversation, correct me if you think I'm wrong, is the funding of it though. How
That's
would
right.
we fund it? And that's, I thought, what we were talking about here, and so that's why I came up with the idea of some sort of phasing. Have you seen anything like this
Yeah,
sort
you
of
can do
project?
phasing, yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you're talking about new, there may be ways to build some of that support space. Not,
Still use this
for
and,
storage
yeah.
stuff, yeah. So certainly do it.
Ideas? That's what we're here for, right? Ideas?
Yeah, I like that. Well, back to your question, I would say the next step is to get resident input, that's what I would say.
I would like to get staff and resident input, if that would be my goal too.
Okay.
But I would wanna make sure everybody's okay with that. You know, and then the question is, do we hire Dwayne to help us with that, so we can actually incorporate that into architectural plans? I would think yes, but that costs money. I could get a proposal from Dwayne, on what that would look like.
Right now, you're in a communication phase. We've committed to help with that communication with them.
Okay.
So, what it says on the end there is, when you get to the next step and is ready to start taking, Township and real more, then, yeah, there's some phases of work that has to be done. If this is just communication, happy to be part of that.
Anybody else?
I mean, we could, or it will take as much time, you know, as we need with that too. It's
Yeah, and, quite honestly, now, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I misunderstood, that if we put it, in one of those plans, there was something about doing something extra to this building?
Not
No,
because,
that
not
was just,
because-
this could be basically occupied as
Or
it is.
for storage or something on the end of this building in the one plan?
Oh, if you were trying to put everything over here in lieu of the new, yes.
Okay, I'm just thinking out of the box, I'm not trying to put anything in any place or direction. If we were to look at the phasing end of it, and the storage that you had talked about, or put in the plan for someplace added to this building, if that was in part of the phasing in of the township hall, we were to put that part of the structure in place first.
Here?
I'm, just,
Oh, but here,
let-
isn't,
just
here's
let
what
me-
you're talking about
let me
though?
blow smoke, please.
No, I know, but here, I want you to understand what you were saying.
Yeah, because one of the plans was putting it in storage or something on this building here. So if we were to put that storage here, and I'm just throwing out ideas, because that's what I do, is, and then purchase the property back here for the township hall, and then phase in the township hall back there, it would leave us space to put something in a place, and if we put in,
Let me ask you something if you don't mind. Why are you opposed to having it at the north end? Of the park?
the only thing I see, Judy, is, I don't disagree with that site, but I think it's putting it right in the middle of a park, and quite honestly, and I'm just throwing out because I like the feel of that kind of, in the park, that kind of little pristine area there. It's kind of like a quiet area inside of this athletic park. I mean, and that's just because I like quiet.
Personally, I think it's wasted space.
Bad because you're a
But-
farmer, and every tree should come down 6
No,
feet.
no,
Then I'll
no,
feel.
no, I hear that, but, you know,
gotta remember, I'm from farming background too.
And if you buy property back here, there's a nice space back there that's kind of a wetlands too, you know, just saying.
Yeah, it is, you know, and that's why I think that if we,
But
Let's look
you're
at-
really jumping the gun on that, so I, you know, that may not even be anything that could happen. And again, that's gonna be additional cost, and so I think that's a secondary reason why I'm
but
against it.
I guess part of this, I'm still trying to work it out in my mind, that if we phase it in and we use the ARP money for this and for the purchase of property, that type of thing, then we have still have the ability to save on down the line for putting this structure up and doing it for having to float very little bond, you know, and so we're placing it over a few years.
I would think if the phasing was done in a good way, that you could empty out some spaces here that could be used for storage without having to add on to this building. If you timed it right. And that's the key about phasing. Especially with something like this, I would think. Anyway, anybody else?
All right, so you heard some of my dreams.
Yep.
My dreams, I guess.
Christina, I don't know if you have anything to say. Just want to be excluded. Okay. Well, I'm gonna open it up, but it could get out of hand, so I just, if we ask a few questions. Dave, you've been patient, so if you want that.
Well, like everything I've been taught since a kid, growing up with my parents, who were never in debt, and built a home and stuff, and the reason why I'm telling you this is to give you my background. The thing I have not heard up here from anybody is what is the financial plan? What is the needs analysis? What is your future people growth? How much space are you going to need 5 years from now? And I know these are expectations, but that's part of your job and your long-term plan. So do you plan, you know, I heard an office manager and a facilitator person and some other things. I know the township is growing. You know, are the plans to bring the fire department into this new building as well? And you shake your head no, but I don't know that. And then bottom line is, you know, Kevin, you just mentioned, and other folks have mentioned, this ARPA funds. What's ARPA funds? You'd mentioned 150,000 and some other fund you'd looked at and some other things that you've done. So what is all that? And bottom line is, what is your expectation? Personally, until I see that, you're gonna get a no vote from me, and I'll push everybody else I can to vote no for that. Understand there's a need, I'm not arguing that, and the township is growing. The other concern I have is that on this May ballot we've got, we're being asked to get rid of KDL. So the conversations I've had with KDL based upon that is we being the township, spend today about $700,000 with them. So if we're gonna get rid of KDL, then are you guys at the same time in the background planning on trying to bring a library here with $700,000 worth of expense or more? How are we gonna fund that? Is that gonna be funded better or differently than what we're currently doing today? You know, is that kinda like, I'll say with, the current federal government, I'm gonna make you look at the right hand while I sneak the left hand in and slap you upside the head. Okay, so I mean, Liz, you asked about what more can we do? From my perspective as a citizen on a fixed income, I wanna see nickels and dimes. And I wanna see exactly what those nickels and dimes are, how and when we're gonna get them. You know, there's this talk about ARPA fund being, something about 24 to commit to the money and spend it by 26. You know, what happens if ARPA goes away? Where does ARPA come from? Is that, I'm assuming that's some kind of a federal government funding thing that we're getting? What happens when that goes away? And the last thing I'll say about that is, I used to live in Waterford Township, centrally located, township halls, the whole kit and caboodle, right? They wanted to hire 5 or 6 policemen. They were gonna all do it on federal funds. And my first question to the board was, how long do you have those federal funds for? 3 years. What are you gonna do after 3 years? Not a word. So my expectation from you people that we voted for and elected is to be conservative. If you're going, tell me you're gonna be conservative financially, then, again, you know.
Well, let me
I wanna
answer
see
some of
nickels and
those
dimes.
things before I forget.
Sure.
So, I know most people in this audience, are in favor of the KDL. And I.
Are or not, I'm sorry.
Are in
They
favor.
are.
Is my guess.
Okay.
We wanted to be able to let people decide if they wanted to stay in or not. It's not whether we're pushing anything other than a choice. And I think we're okay with however they vote, however you vote, right? We felt the people that voted and, well, I'm gonna speak for myself. I felt it was proper because we have two libraries, the Cedar Springs Library, they do that on $250,000 per year. That's that's their expense and revenue. Sparta Library does it for $285,000 per year, and we're paying $715,000 per year. Neither of them are part of KDL. Now, with that said, nobody up here has said KDL doesn't do a good job. And I think we'd be fine with the sharing, I think we'd be fine ultimately with the books. The one thing that KDL does exceptionally well is the digital. So if you like digital service, they excel at that. But the best option we could do is to join one of those two libraries,
In your opinion?
in my opinion, yeah. So we wanted to give people a choice. So, with the funding, so we have a capital plan. We started a capital plan years ago. I actually think Bob and Court kind of started that back in the day. And we do work sessions every year, and we set aside, and this is just a plan, we have, put $140,000 per year is what we could afford. That's just a starting point. So we already have that we could do in some kind of loan or bonding. ARPA funds, we already have that money, they gave it to us already, it's $1.3 million, we have it sitting in the bank.
And ARPA stands for America Recovery.
Yeah, American Rescue Plan, yeah.
That's fine. Okay.
And just so you know how conservative we are, there's 1,400 townships, there were only 14 that turned it down. We were one of the townships that turned it down because we were not happy with the debt. And so, mostly because of the fiscal part. Not all of us voted that way, but as a board we did. And then 4 months later, we're like, this is crazy, the inflation, we can't give it back to the residents anyway. We decided we should take it, and we were able to take that. Good, bad, or otherwise. So, but we understand the fiscal responsibility is what I'm trying to say. So we have it, we have to decide how we're gonna use it, but we have it, unless we decide not to spend it on something, then we may have to give it back, but all the interest that we get to keep. So there's really no downside in that regard.
But again, the conversation, and what I've just heard, Kevin, is that there's money out there and stuff. I can go to Cedar Springs, I can go to Sparta for $225 for a library versus spending $700 here, but there's no detail. Is that $225, and I'm gonna just use flat numbers for easy math. Say it's $250 a year per library, right? Is that $250 a year, is that for everything? The cost of the building? Does it cost that to build the building?
It's tight, but it's everything.
So they built the building on $250,000 a year.
No.
The new building they just put in up at Cedar Springs, again.
No, I'm saying their costs are $250,000.
Okay.
So
But
the
that's the point.
best thing, Dave, that we could do, the easiest thing, but we have to get permission, is to join one of the libraries and we partner with them, just like Solon does. Solon partners with Cedar Springs.
But Cedar Springs, I've been told by KDL is going to KDL.
I'm sure they're saying that.
They want them to go to KDL, so.
I'm sure they do.
And I understand,
But
the whole political
Sure.
game people play. But my point is that there's been no money and there's been no details given to people that says,
Right, because
Here's what
it's the
costs you
chicken and the
pay.
egg, so I've been trying, and I don't blame my board members, because we're trying to figure out the timing, and this is all new to all of us.
so then why is it on a ballot for May 2nd when we're talking chicken and the eggs and we timing and all the other stuff?
Because we were put in a a tight timeframe. If we didn't decide by February seventh, we would not be able to vote as a township whether we wanna stay or not. Cause you have to vote 6 months before their, expiration date, which is.
So what would that have hurt if we let that slide one more?
Then
year?
we would not have been able to get out, and they're proposing a 10 to 15 year bond, 10 to 15 years, and you would not be able to get out at that point. At
So
that
if we
point,
don't vote by May second, we're locked into a 10 or 15-year bond that we can't get
no,
out.
well, so they're proposing, so they have to go for a renewal, but that's for the whole county. But us as a township, if we just wanted to try to do something different, us as a township had put on the ballot
There's
when we did.
deadlines to get language on a ballot.
No,
So
I
the deadline
understand
for
that.
that was
Right.
February seventh, but their expiration date is this December of their millage. Their KDL's expiration, or their millage expires this December
This of 23.
of 23.
So then why couldn't the election been in October of
They
23?
had to do 6 months up earlier.
Yeah, 6 months earlier, and for
That's
this
the way
was
the
a
laws were.
15-year lock-in, 15 years. Once you're in, you can't do anything, you
Well,
can't.
you can withdraw, but you
How
have
much
to
is
keep
it gonna
paying.
cost us to run a library for 15 years?
So if we
You
join.
don't know. No, the honest answer to that is you don't know.
Yep.
No, we wanted to, we actually had, plans set in place.
For 0.4 mil, that brings in 225 grand a year, which is Solon is paying right now.
So then is the reason you want a new building here is to turn this into a library? Because you're not gonna build a building for
No,
2.45
no,
years.
for this, it would be a backup plan potentially.
Yeah,
Pardon?
we had had plans for a new township.
Ideally, we join one of the 2 libraries, that's the plan.
But I'm not convinced I would get the same service out of one of those libraries that I would out of
That's
KDL.
what we're giving you your choice. This meeting is not about KDL.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it to KDL, what I'm trying to understand is your entire plan, of which the KDL portion of this is part of this meeting.
Sure,
Because
that's
it
why I'm
is a
answering some.
backdoor of expense that you're talking about with these other buildings. So it is part of the conversation, and I don't wanna make it the whole thing, and
So
I'll shut up.
I put my cards up in the front, I will spend as much time as you want.
Okay, that's
as much
fine,
as-
we have a meeting this week, so I'm okay with that, but I just wanted to bring these things up
No problem.
to get across the board
I
understanding of
under-
where
I
folk are.
understand, Dave.
Okay.
There's a hand in the back, Roberta.
Me? Okay. 2 questions. If we're planning for the future with a new building, are there any plans for, solar or different electrical plans that will eventually down the road cut prices of what's going on? That's number 1. Number 2, point of clarification when it comes to KDL. KDL will have an election in, fall of 2024.
You do not
for
know
re-
that, they have not filed any language or any proposals to do that. They have 90 days before any election date to do that, they have not filed anything to date.
2024.
They do not, and they have not filed anything with Kent County.
Okay.
Unless you can prove it to me, otherwise, they have not done that.
Okay,
They could put something on the ballot this fall even if they wanted to.
okay. However, at that point, whenever they put it on for 10, 5, 15 years, none of us know, at that point, the entire county votes. And it votes as a group.
Yes, you're correct, yep.
And right now, what Kevin is saying is that they decided, this board decided, that they wanted us to vote this May with only 3 months' notice to pull us out of KDL.
Roberta, you could vote any way you want, I mean, anybody here, that's why I'm not understanding all the.
Did any of us
when-
decide that we wanted to be pulled out of KDL? No.
Well, you don't have to, you can vote any way you want, if you all decide. to vote.
Yes, but you decided to put it on the ballot
We did.
without
We
any
did the choice.
public input, and that includes this 30-member group. Nothing in anything that I have read here says that that group, which was looking toward the future, said anything about removing Algoma from KDL. In fact, in the future,
And
it
the
said,
strategic plan is not all comprehensive, there are things outside of that, just like goal setting or anything else in life. That is not all inclusive, it will never be all inclusive, there are things that are happening at all times. So
But-
I understand,
Voter input is what we rely on, that's what we're trying to achieve, is input from the residents through their votes.
Did anybody here, ever hear about
No,
pulling out of
Roberta, you're
KDL?
not doing that.
No,
Or I'll
not until
stop.
it was
I'll
on the
stop.
ballot.
Public comment. Go ahead. There's a gentleman in the back, then I'll take you, Allison.
I just, real quick, so, I guess not understand the whole library system, I guess. So, I mean, we are part of KDL. I use Sparta Library all the time. So, what does that mean, like, what does that mean for library for us? Do we pay, do we have to pay, do we not pay, is it still
That's a
free?
really good question, actually. So, all of our libraries are, well, I shouldn't say all libraries are public, but the ones that are public libraries, it's in the name, public, so you can go to those libraries, right? It's the cooperatives, that's the book sharing. And Lakeland Cooperative is in charge of this area. So Sparta's part of that, Cedar Springs is part of that. If we ended up doing something here, and I'm not saying that's our first choice, Solon said they would look at joining us. The first step we would do is join a cooperative, and that's the book sharing, right? And they have criteria. One of those is being you have to do at least a 0.3 mil. I had proposed a 0.5 mil. The board said, hey, let's wait on that. Because maybe we want to go higher, depending on what the residents want, right? So, but the very least is we would do that. And then they also have a requirement for a number of books. We'd have to purchase 2 books for the population, so we need to purchase 24,000 books. So they have criteria, is what I'm saying. So that's the cooperative. So Sparta is part of the cooperative, and so is Cedar Springs. So that's why, and those are the only 2, I believe, that are not part of the KDL.
You can go to any public library. I can go to Grand Rapids, even though I don't live in Grand Rapids, because I have a library card. You can still use whatever library you want. You know, people, there's a misnomer that we're trying to take someone's library away. No. If you live in Rockford and you go to that library, you will continue to go to that library if you wish.
No.
It's just about funding libraries, so that's what I was understanding.
No.
No, because you're part of
If I can
KDL.
make
We're
a
gonna do
comment.
cooperative.
No, if we get a,
Right, if you join the
Yes,
cooperative.
yes, we would join the cooperative.
So
Right.
if we're part of the cooperative, you can still go to any library.
So I guess that's my question, like, that's what I need to know, like, I have no information about that side of it, like,
Well-
I would like, that's what I need to know.
So I will meet with any of you as long as you want. This meeting was not about the library. I understand that they're tied, so I can take some generic questions. But Allison, you have a question?
I'm gonna bring it back to the building, just, so we can wind up maybe, I don't know. But, I'm Allison Flegelin with Parks and Rec, and I just wanna remind the board that before anything happens with the park or the building in the park, come talk to us too. We have a master plan for the park. You guys have all seen it, and we just wanna make sure that if the building does come to the park, that the master plan for the park gets updated, or there's other future, amenities created that were supposed to go there, so. Or the quiet spaces, or that kind of thing.
Good plan. I'll make sure to do that. Thank you.
We communicate well.
I think Julie would be on my case every other day if I didn't do that. Sarah in the back.
Same with the building. I'm a small business owner, and every decision I make, before I make it, I say, how much is this going to cost me? And how much can I afford to put into it? And I heard a lot of comments from the board of what's our next step? What's our next step? Chicken before the egg, cart before the horse, however you want to say it. I'm hearing 5 million, but we don't really know how much we have to spend on it. So I think, in my view, and you can have your own view however you want, I think the next step would be how much can you really afford into putting a renovation into this building, or can you afford to buy that property, or can you afford to add a new building on the other side? And my other comment is not to take away from the presentation at all whatsoever, because it was very well done, but I think that the townships that were picked to look at are very different than this township. This township is not Gaines Township. It's not. It's growing, but it's not Gaines Township. I think that you're better off putting those resources into community programs, the fire department, for example. If you're growing at this fast, well, I think you said, Mr. Green, you said the second fastest growing community in the state. things like that, like if my house catches on fire, I'd like to know that the fire department is coming there. And right now, you have a fire department that's paid on call and some full-time members, I think.
It says on the May ballot, it's a renewal.
Okay,
Making this
so-
fire department full-time.
I guess what I'm trying to say is your next steps, in my view, would be how much can you afford? And including the furniture, the insurance, how much is this building insured for currently?
We just approved that last board meeting.
Yeah, what's the value of this building insured for? You should know that, because you take that and how much are you gonna be paying in insurance on the $2 million worth of furniture that you're buying and the $5 million building that you're buying? So those are the things that you need to figure out before you decide what plan you're going to do. Because you need to know how much you can spend before you spend it. When I went to buy a house, let me finish. When I went to buy a house, they said, how much do you have in the bank? How much do you make a year? Here's how much you can spend. That's how it works. You have to figure out what you can spend before you spend it. And I have to go put my kids to bed, so I hope you have a wonderful night.
You are correct, I'm doing that, but I totally agree. I totally agree.
Thank God.
So, good stuff. So somebody else,
I just